And with a distinguished military career, personal friend of Dr. Venz, and a keeper of the flame, the guardian and a true guardian of the osteopathic profession, I would like to bring to the podium this morning Dr. William D. Strample, D.O., for the A.T. Still Lecture.
Well, good morning. And first of all, let me say I'm very honored to follow the long stream of people that have been the A.T. Still Memorial Lecture. I want to thank President Norm Vin, President-elect Bob Uhas, my esteemed peers in the crowd, the affiliate organization representatives, the ambassadors, the invited guests, friends, my family who happens to be here, and thank you for providing me this opportunity to speak. Now, just so nobody gets in trouble, I was asked a question when I was coming up here this morning about who vetted your slides and who vetted your material. And the answer is nobody, which scares the people behind me. Okay. Number two, here are my slides. Okay, you're not going to see them. I heard death by PowerPoint, and I tend to agree with that, and I'm going to have a conversation today. Number four, I'm a little jet lagged. About 1 week ago, I was in Seoul, South Korea, and I was delivering the opening to the One Health Conference at the University of Seoul. And when I got on the plane to go to South Korea, on the way down to the gate, I broke a tooth. And then I'm on the plane, and they close the door, and I have a 14-and-a-half-hour flight, and the pain continued to get worse. To give you an example, if you ever saw Tom Hanks in the movie Castaway, I was about ready to do that same thing, okay, with this. There was no pain medicine that you could get on the plane because they won't give it to you anymore, and so I was fortunate enough sitting next to a young woman, so I treated my dental pain with Midol from the United States to Korea. It's better than nothing, but Midol, I don't know if it will affect me later on or not, okay? So I spent 4 days in Korea, and then by the time I got done with my toothache and everything, I came back and I had an abscess in my upper jaw and whatever. And on Monday of this week, I had a temporary root canal done and whatever, and I'm on antibiotics. And so for this, it gives you my issue of having been there to do this. I'm very honored to do the A.T. Still Lecture in this very auspicious year. When I was asked to do this, I was very honored to do it, but then I suddenly realized that we're coming into quite a discussion in the profession, and I assumed that they gave it to me because I've been involved in every war since Vietnam to the first Gulf War, and they figure I'm used to jumping in and out of foxholes, and I almost brought my B bag, and for those in the military, you understand what the A and B bag are. So it's a deployment bag, and in my B bag, that has the flak vest to do that. I didn't do that. I'm not wearing that today because I actually wrote an editorial a couple of weeks ago about the issues about this is all family. This is all family, and all this, whether you agree or not agree in your difference of opinion, it ultimately comes down to family and how that is. Now, I'm in my 48th year of marriage, and I've had several discussions. I've never won an argument at home, okay, to do that, okay? But bottom line is you survive all that because you can disagree on major points, but it doesn't mean you disagree as a profession on the issue to do this. So my title today of the talk was, and they don't have my clock going, and they should, but I'll try to keep it on time to do this. My title today would be, for the students out there, it would be WWATSD, because we all do these things in initials now to do this. And that would be what would Still do on this issue to do this if he was here today when we were discussing these discussions with the merger. Yesterday, the students did a flash mob, and I thought that was very entertaining. I live with a group of students at medical school. It's the thing that keeps me energized. I really enjoy it, and as Tom said, he has the best students. I actually disagree. I actually have the best students at Michigan State, but to do that. Yeah. We are all in this discussion, and I kind of wanted to take the tack of how did we get here? By the way, for those of the young people in the audience, this is absolutely a key sentinel moment for the profession, and you have people going around like they shot their mother, and if this happens, it's the worst thing in the world and whatever. And I remember the discussion when we added surgery to the name of osteopathic physicians and surgeons, we had the same debate, how it was the end of the world. When Michigan State University opened as a medical school, and they were, oh my God, going to have students share classes with the MD colleagues, this was heresy, and it was the end of the profession in 1968-69. None of that's true, and it won't be true today of whatever we decide on whichever thing to go with. Still, if you think about it, was what we would determine today as a very disruptive innovator. He was a revolutionary, he was a free thinker, and he was not afraid to shake up the conventional way of thinking. And so if he was here today, he would probably be thinking, gee, this is the normal evolution of what we do. We have put out signs that said AT still, MD DO. So bottom line is, I'm not getting into the conversation of whether he was this or whether he was that and what he did, but I want to give you kind of a perspective of how he grew up and the environment he grew up in to do this. In the 1700s and the early 1800s, the House of Medicine was divided because we basically treated things with the four humors, the balancing them out. If you read 1825 from Harvard, they talk about the four humors, and we treated those four humors with lead, arsenic, opium, alcohol, and mercury, because that will lower your body temperature. Okay? Bottom line, the House of Medicine back then, and I don't criticize it because it was the standard of care for everybody there, but bottom line is you were lucky to not go to see a physician to do this, because it might likely would kill you than not. And in that environment in 1825, there were 176 medical schools in the United States. 26 of them were homeopathic, 23 of them were eclectic, and if you want to know what that is, I can tell you later, okay, to do that. And the rest of them were our traditional MD schools, most of them on the East Coast, clearly, and to do that. And in that environment, patients were pretty smart. You went to the doctor, you didn't get better, you might die, and so the homeopathic group and the eclectic group were very popular. And that certainly didn't make our MD colleagues very happy at the moment. To give you an example, we tend to use the term allopathic to define our MD colleagues, but you need to understand the derivation of that term. It was an insultive term created by the homeopathic physicians to describe our MD colleagues, and we use it all the time, okay, to do that. It's funny, but bottom line, it's an actually historical fact. MDs were not doing well in 1825, 1830, 1840, and in 1847 they created the AMA, which is why we have this aversion to they're going to try to put us out of business. Because the first three tenets of the AMA, coming out of New York, David, okay, to do this, was the first three tenets of the AMA was to control the licensure and supply of physicians and to make sure that the general public knew that the science of medicine was better than anything else to do that. I don't fault that group back in 1847. They were trying to protect their guild politics, which is what we are trying to do today, in one sense, protect our guild politics in this issue. But 1847 changed the thing. When you control the licensure, you control the supply, and pretty soon by the 1870s, most of the eclectic schools had gone by the wayside, and the homeopathic schools did not go out of existence. Most of them were absorbed into mainstream medicine. Hahnemann in Philadelphia was a homeopathic medical school. That small trade school south of Lansing in Ann Arbor, the University of Michigan, started as a homeopathic medical school. They don't like to use that, but that's actually some of their historical roots there to do this. Think about in that early 1800s where Still was born, in the first part of that 19th century. Hospitals, things that we take for granted here. Massachusetts General Hospital, why was that created? It was not created to take care of the sick. It was to take care of the sick and dying and get them off the street so the rich didn't have to step over them. That's really what it was. No doctor worth his salt in 1825 ever practiced in a hospital. They didn't do it. That's where they sent the people that didn't. Doctors practice in your home, or you weren't well to do this. Life insurance that we take, everybody in this room's probably got some life insurance. Life insurance was not created because they wanted to protect your future. It was created for the London Company because they had so many indentured servants dying on the boats coming over. They wanted something to protect their capital investment, and that's how life insurance got started. And this is the environment to which A.T.L. Still was born to do this. He studied. He was an MD, if we take that issue, and he basically decided in that term that he was going to shake things up because he had some losses. And basically, his personal tragedies that we talk about is he lost family members to spinal meningitis and pneumonia, and he had a wife die in childbirth, if the history is to be believed. And this was not an uncommon degree of loss for anybody in the 19th century. It was more common than not, okay? But he didn't just accept it that that was the standard and the fate of life. He began to look at it, and he created, as an observer, and he was not the second coming of Christ or Muhammad or whatever your religious persuasion is. He was an observational person. And he learned from what he observed. He learned from the people that he worked on. He learned from the people he watched. He learned from those things, and he studied the function, and he studied the structure that followed it. And with that, this whole, basically, profession grew out of that issue, and we have the beneficiaries of this issue to do this. He was at the right place and the right time for revolutionary change. And here's the other thing. This all came together, okay, because he was in Missouri. My friends in Missouri. If he had had this started on the East Coast, we would not be here today. It was far enough out in the Midwest that no doctors were in the Midwest. For those of us my age that remember Gunsmoke, and I know the students don't remember unless they saw it on Nick at Night, Doc probably wasn't a physician, okay, to do that. The people in the Midwest seeing the doctors were somebody that was going to help them, the barbers and the things that were there that could help them do this. Still was at the right place in the right time, and he got osteopathic medicine large enough over those 30 years in the Midwest that by the time the licensure fights began, it was already too big. You couldn't be beaten down. If he had started on the East Coast, we would all be somewhere else to do this. What would Andrew Taylor still do if he was sitting here today? The interesting thing is, this is the first time in about 200 years that we actually have 4 generations in the workforce. Executive Director Fane White mentioned that yesterday. It is a generational issue, okay, with this. That flash mob that you saw for the students, I had to explain it to several of my colleagues around what in the hell were they doing, okay, to do that, okay. If you think about it, the traditionalists, those born before 1946, and some of them are still here today, we're still working on this, they were more formal, and basically in their communication style, they want it detailed, they want prose writing style, they want to accept and trust authority. I mean, absolutely, if the guys are saying we're going to accept this, whatever, and they want their mail, commercial, snail mail print, they want to see it in writing, they don't want to read a Kindle book, because by God, I have to hold that paper and I have to hold that book in my hand. Okay. But then you have the baby boomers, and I'm a tweener between those two groups, and the baby boomers came in and they're semi-formal, they chunk it down, but they want everything they can get when they're communicating. They want it relevant to the bottom line on the rewards. They accept the rules created by the traditionalists, for the most part. They'll grumble about them underneath the current, but they accept them for what they are. And they want their print conventional. They want face-to-face communications. They actually want to talk to somebody on the phone, okay, to do that. They actually still have a landline in their house, okay, to do that. And they want the information handy and available. And then you get the Gen Xers, which are now our young workforce out there to do this. Phenomenal group, and I've been dealing with this for a while. They're not so serious, okay, sometimes irreverent. They want to get to the point. They want to know what I need to know. They want what's relevant and what matters to me, okay, to do this. They are open to question authority and often are branded as very cynical and skeptics to do that. They're the young guys that were sitting there that we are challenging us, and we don't like that. I have professors that get very upset with this. They're online, they have some face-to-face contact, they like games, they like technology, and they want information at the speed immediately when I need it. And the frequency is whenever, okay, to do that. Now the ones are the millennials, though, and the millennials are very interesting. They like things that are eye-catching and fun. The slides we've seen and the shows we've seen for the last few House of Delegates is directed because many of the millennials are now entering that workforce, and they have some entertainment for that issue. The content of the information is they want, if and when I need it, I'll find it online. And as I'm speaking, we have people online right now texting on their thing and looking at what they do to do that. They're okay with authority that earns their respect, but they will immediately walk away on that issue if they lose that respect for them. They're online, they're wired. This group here, it is actually socially unacceptable to call somebody without texting them first. I'm serious. They will look at you like, well, what if I don't want to answer the call? Well, do what I do, ignore it, but they don't do it. I have grandchildren that are, my youngest granddaughter may be in the house here today, and she was a page at the House of Delegates. She's just graduated from high school. If I want to get a hold of my grandkids, I text them, because if I call them, they'll never answer the phone to do that. And it's the same way with my students. If I call their cell phone, I'll never get an answer, but if I send them an email or text, I get an immediate response. So into this generational context of 4 of our generations all working together and all friction together on this issue, I've heard people in the last several days say, well, the students are passionate, but they don't understand. Oh, really? Okay. I actually think the students understand as much as we understand, because everybody comes at this from their own special issue to do this. I sat through a couple hours of the delegates' debate yesterday. I didn't entertain it. I was listening to it because I've seen the emotion of this rise, like somebody is going to die if we decide this way or that way, and I'm going to tell you none of that's true to do that. Not one bit. We'll all get up in the morning, and we'll all go back, and we'll all have breakfast, and we'll all go to our practice, and we'll all drive our car, and everybody will be fine to do this. If we decide that this is the way the House wants to go and we want to merge with the accreditation system, I think that's absolutely great. I won't pick up my toys and go home. If we don't decide, I won't pick up my toys and go home. I'm still going to try to teach the students best, because ultimately I realize it's kind of like climate change. You get people that argue, I don't believe in climate change. I don't get excited. I don't care whether you believe it or not. It's going to happen one way or the other, okay? You know, to do it. It's not going to change. And so why invest that kind of emotional energy and that kind of anger in this? Now, there are people in this house that probably don't like me. That's okay. There are people in this house I don't like, okay, to do that. Okay, that's it, to do that. What I don't think Still did was, I don't think he ever said, I don't want to share my concepts in medicine with anybody. I want to only have this a closed club. I only want to have this to the people that I trust and I know to do this. I actually think the first crisis in osteopathic medicine was probably when Little John said, I'm out of here, to use the term locally. And he went to Europe and he did these things and whatever, and that was probably a crisis. And Still had that decision and that debate in that time of whether he was going to do medicine in general or he was going to do manual medicine only. And that was a key moment. That was one of the first sentinel moments in the profession to do this. He did not serve to close the club today. He basically would share with everybody on this thing to do this. As we face the challenges today, in the next few minutes, we will build on the solid foundation that's still set down in our as a history of innovation and dedication to medicine. And I ask you for a moment to consider mainstream medicine and osteopathic medicine as 2 sides of a long timeline. Now, I use this exact demonstration on a cable TV network in Detroit with my colleagues from Ann Arbor and Wayne State, and I said to them, Once there were two branches of medicine in the earliest 20th century, and basically osteopathic medicine was here and allopathic medicine was here, and it was their philosophy and approach to patients and how we did this. And over the last 80 years, or 60, 80 years, this has happened. Allopathic medicine has moved this way. You can't now say that we have the wholly owned concept on holistic health care. I have many fine allopathic physicians that have that same thing. This profession, has changed the face of American medicine. Now, when you say that on a cable TV network with deans of University of Michigan, Wayne State, you can expect some pushback, okay? But I didn't get as much pushback as I thought, because realistically the point being is, and they were making the point because they had asked me this, didn't osteopathic medicine end when the osteopathic hospitals went away? No, it didn't. Actually, osteopathic hospitals existed at a time when there were Jewish hospitals and black hospitals because we couldn't practice anywhere else. And the day you could practice at the Mayo Clinic, and the day you could practice at Harvard, and the day you could practice anywhere else, those hospitals changed their focus. Doctors were not driving 22 miles across Colorado Springs to practice at the osteopathic hospital when they could practice at the hospital a mile from their house. It had nothing to do with osteopathic medicine diminishing. It increased osteopathic medicine on that issue. So the more exposure we have, the more deeply rooted we are in this issue to do this. What would Andrew Taylor, still sitting in this room today, say about this debate? What would he say? And this is my opinion. This is not the AOA. I have nobody vetting my opinion to do this. I would argue that he would say we give up nothing by sharing our principles and philosophy with MDs. We don't lose a thing to do that. We are not losing anything by showing people that if you pay attention to the patient and you really treat the patients better, we don't have patients doing us a favor, okay? We're not doing them a favor when we see them. They're doing us a favor when they come to see us. It drives me crazy, okay? Go ahead, that's fine. Some people won't, but that's it. We have, for years, universally used the time, I'm sorry I was late for this appointment, but I was busy, I was taking care of an emergency. Most of that is BS. You were having coffee and you were chatting up the secretary, okay? And it's back because you actually believe your time is more important than that person's time. And you see that sometimes in the large academic medical centers. There's an aloofness that gets there, and this profession can change that with this. The more osteopathic physicians we have in those kind of training programs, you can take your philosophy and you can do this. Is there a, thank you. Is there a magic in the way we offer graduate education? I would say, having been in all of this system for years now, both on the allopathic side and the osteopathic side, that 90% of this is the same no matter what. We have an advantage in that community-based graduate medical education is a real strength. It really is a real strength. It teaches our students and our young doctors how to deal with patients and their problems much earlier in the career. And I would say we need to change that on the allopathic side to have them have that advantage too, because it will help more patients in the United States to do this. 60% of our graduates are already in ACGME, and I've heard people say, well, it's the COCA's fault, okay, or it's the AOA trustees' fault, or it's the college's fault, or whatever, and it has nothing to do with that. It's all our fault. For the last 25 years, 30 years, this has been on a steady track. This didn't just happen this year. This didn't fall out. I apologize to the Michigan delegation at our delegates meeting in Michigan because they were insulated from a lot of that. While it was burning on the West Coast, and this has been an issue for 10 or 12 years, in Michigan, we created slots. I have more slots in Michigan than I have graduates, and I'm the only college in the profession that can say that. That's great. But that can't be sustained everywhere. I would like to have the rule that said you can only have osteopathic students trained in hospitals that have 100% osteopathic physicians. Well, that'll eliminate our problem. There will no longer be any more osteopathic medical students. We're not going to go there. I've had people say COCA needs to get on this and close these schools. Okay, I've been on COCA for quite a while. We've had this debate. COCA, for those of you who don't know, is the Commission on College Accreditation, Osteopathic College Accreditation. If we change the rules so that we make it harder for somebody to start a medical school, all the schools have to meet that standard. Okay? I'm up for it. But if we change the rules to where we would have to make it where it close them down, we would lose 3 of the original 5 schools, most likely. Show of hands, who's in favor of that? I didn't think so. Most of the graduate don't necessarily want your school going out of business. I'm from one of those schools. I wouldn't want it to go out of business either. So it's not an easy thing to say this group did it or this group did it or they weren't paying attention. No, it's all of us. It is the circumstance. Life changed. Life will continue to change. The government changed. The cities changed. Everything's changed. I'm reminded of a movie that was called, just on TV, called Pleasantville, if you remember that. Tobey Maguire, and they have Bill Macy was in this. Bill Macy played the father, kind of modeled after Father Knows Best. And I just eliminated all of Generation X's and Millennials, okay. But Bill Macy plays this, and life is changing in his small town, and they're becoming from black and white into color, and he sits there, and he's asked, Tobey Maguire's asked him his question, and he's sitting there, and his head's down, and he goes, "It's not fair," which I hear in the group here to do this. Well, there's no guarantee that life is going to be fair. It never was, okay? And I can guarantee you there's no guarantee that something's not going to change. So when I hear somebody say we need to go back the way it was, I smile because I understand the sentiment to do that. But you can't put this genie back in the bottle. Not now, and probably not ever to do this. Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine is an international medical school. For those of you who didn't know that, I'll tell you that. We've not officially designated that, but for the last 4 years, I take 25 Canadian citizens into the osteopathic program at Michigan State University at the bequest of the university, and the Michigan State University backed my play, and we've invested about $500,000 a year in scholarship money for Canadian students. Why? Well, that's good, but why? Okay. In 1920, while the osteopathic profession was here, we allowed the government in Canada to do the Practice Act in Canada, which essentially eliminated practice rights for osteopathic physicians in Canada. And we were the beneficiary because it drove all these Canadian osteopathic physicians back into the United States. Hospitals in Macomb. The first female dean of any medical school in the United States came from being an osteopathic physician, moved out of Canada because she couldn't practice there anymore. So it's time the osteopathic profession, American osteopathic medicine, goes outside our borders. This is very important for survival. If we rely only on the United States, we will be successful and we will be fine and we will eventually become a footnote in history, as a nice footnote, but bottom line, will somebody, yeah, you remember 200 years ago that osteopathic physicians, they're now all in this issue to do this. And there's DOs out there, and the DOs in Canada and the DOs in Britain and the DOs in New Zealand are all there. They do manual medicine stuff. When Dr. Wickless got me involved with the Osteopathic International Alliance, it was an eye-opener to me to go around and meet Australia and New Zealand and whatever. They're very passionate about what they do, and they're very good. I spoke at the British College of Osteopathic Medicine's graduation. Princess Anne was on the podium with me. They're sponsored by the royal family in Britain. I was hoping for the young one, but I didn't get it. Okay. But their curriculum, Charles Hunt will tell you, and I've talked with him at length, he's the principal over there, they don't call him dean. He will tell you that in the curriculum, they have 7,000 hours of manual medicine. They know what they're doing on this. I got in a heck of a debate in London with Viola Fryman. She was there. And she was arguing with me about the concept of accreditation and how that serves no purpose at all. Now, Viola was in 90, and I respect that generation, but bottom line is it's a different world there. But the United States brand of osteopathic medicine has to go outside the border. I will graduate the first class of Canadian students this May. I will tell you that we are sponsoring them to take the MCCEE, which is the Canadian equivalent of the foreign medical graduate exam that we take in the United States. I've also been told that in Ontario province alone, they set aside 200 residency slots for foreign medical graduates, and DOs training in the United States, even though they're Canadian citizens, are considered foreign medical graduates. Now, the Canadians I brought here the first day of class, I give them instruction. They're not allowed to date anybody in the United States, okay, to do that. Because I want them to go home. I want them to go there. Basically, I want to expand osteopathic medicine. To give you an example, we just lost at the AOA leadership a person that worked for the AOA a long time, Doug Ward, who was he came from Canada, and he was a PhD that worked with the profession here. And Doug was with me when I went to Canada 10 years ago to try to get an osteopathic medical school started in Canada. And when they closed it off for me there, I brought him to the United States where they can't touch it to do this. I also now have one student, we'll probably have 10 more from Mexico, because in the Yucatan we got full practice privileges for DOs, and I have a full-time faculty member in the Yucatan. And I think the next course for this house will be, how do we encourage full practice privileges for DOs and bring people from those countries in to train here so that American brand of osteopathic medicine goes forward and advances to what they say to do this. I'm advocating, obviously, that we take a step back and take a little of the emotion out of the discussion about whether we're going to do this or not. I think we should. That's my position. But I also respect people that, for a lot of reasons, think it's the other way. I have great empathy for the DMEs that feel like they're threatened on the issue, because if we have a single accreditation system, the DO program director is going to lose their slot. I also do think, though, however, that the cat's out of the bottle on this. It doesn't matter. No hospital CEO, and I ran hospitals in the Army, is going to fund two separate things. What they're interested in and why they did dual programs was to have DOs come to their program. Once they come, and once they know that's a pipeline, they're not going to pay for two things. So I think we need to support the DMEs and the program directors to get them up so that they will be accepted. And we won't get them all, but I think we need to get as many as we can in the negotiating team accepted in there to do that. Still basically built a brotherhood that was oneness, and it basically was inclusivity, not exclusivity. He did not close doors. His students came from all over the generations, and they were not meant to be popular. They were there to help the patients and to do what they thought. And together, DOs together can basically continue this thing. What we've had is a struggle, a fight within the family, okay? We have some phenomenal DOs. We have celebrated DOs that have been at the Mayo Clinic. We have celebrated DOs that were at Harvard. We've celebrated DOs that became the Surgeon General of the Army. And now we go, well, no, they're not quite DO enough, okay? If they trained at Harvard, they clearly couldn't be DO enough to do that. We have substituted the term DO for the substitute of whether they have board certification, this or that. That's not what Still wanted. Still didn't have board certification on this. It was the degree. No final degree was there but the term DO. And I don't care when you graduate from any of the DO medical schools in this country and you go out and you want to get the best training you can, and if it happens to be at Harvard or Yale, okay, that doesn't make you less DO. Come on, okay, to do that. We have students that acquire a debt now that's approaching $200,000 when they graduate. And for those of us that went to school when your entire debt was $4,000, that's a little bit. You go, well, why couldn't they? I paid for it. Sure you did. They can't. It's impossible to do this. But here's what we have. We have such emotion running on this that they published an ad in the Sun-Times yesterday that probably cost $10,000 at least, okay? That would be a third of a student's tuition that we just pissed away on that ad that will mean nothing. That's the disclaimer. I didn't want the AOA to be blamed. They had nothing to do with those issues to do that. It's okay. We have choices to make. I really am honored to have followed the Gene Oliveris and the Lonnie Eskis and those people that have been up here. Gene's Year of the Student still resonates with what we've got here. First time I met Ed Lonieski was on the executive board of the National Practitioner Data Bank. That's the first time I really met him. I gave him advice on how to use the metro system in Washington, D.C., okay, to do that. So I've grown up in the profession. I was here in the House as a military person with this. I remember in the 70s when we were there, and in my military program out in Seattle, Pete, by the way, Tacoma, Seattle, I had to go, okay, and I had to pay $1,800, okay, to have 3 people come from the AOA to approve my program in medicine in Seattle. Now, part of our staff was Petersdorf. You remember he wrote the textbook of medicine, okay? And the guy that was my chief of medicine went on to be the chief of medicine at Yale, and they were very polite, but I remember paying that money to have them come out to say, yes, you're good enough in the military. And then the military organization got big enough that we suddenly said, well, they're all good. So we have all these osteopathic physicians in the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and they're DO enough, right? Okay, to do that? So we need to worry as a profession less about where somebody trains and get them back in this organization. 30 years ago, I'm almost done, okay? 30 years ago, if you came to this house and you stood there, there would be a guy with a cigar, and the older people know who I'm talking about, okay? Who would stand there and you've said, gee, I'm really interested about coming back and joining with the osteopathic profession. He would go, you chose to leave here, you could use the term LAMFO for the students who would know what I'm talking about to do that, okay? And he basically walked away, and then we wondered why that group of people never wanted to come back. Well, we can say, you can join, but you can never be in leadership. Why in the hell would you do that? I'm actually surprised with the thousands of DOs out there that they haven't already formed a separate organization, which scares me to death. If we don't bring them back, they will form a separate organization, and then that's a bigger threat to us than whether we have a unified accreditation system. So I would make the argument that we need to worry less about board certification and where you did it or not. Whether you did this exam or that exam, you're a DO. You will always be a DO, and we need to bring those DOs home here to do this. Thank you for your attention. Appreciate it.